being able to preserve your customers went from being important to existential. No longer was it just important to do, but everybody, all CEOs were starting to wrap their heads around, how are we going to accommodate for our customers? How are we going to adjust our payment terms? How are we going to adjust for more flexible payments? Because once you lose the existing customers, there's this, profound impact on your future forecast and revenues.
The next speaker, I'm absolutely thrilled to have Irit Eizips. So very, very welcome, Irit. As I said, it's great to have you here. Very, very honored. Irit is going to talk about the futures now, emerging CS strategy trends in 2020. Irit is year after year has been voted the top customer success strategist. So quite an honor. Anyway, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Peter. With so many changes and this pandemic being very much impactful on most of us being in SaaS companies or having some sort of a subscription-based model. And so I want to talk about what have we seen in the market. First of all, as a customer success consulting firm, we get requests all the time, all through the year, all through this period. I want to share some of the interesting things and requests that we've been getting this year. But also we have launched a research back in April, May, when we started seeing some of these changes and we kind of assessed the impact on SaaS companies and how this impact really changed the way CEOs look at customer success. I mean, we had big companies like Ernst & Young and Bain Capital release these huge research and recommendations for various industries, not just technologies, to start embracing customer success. You're welcome to Google it. It was really interesting period this last 6 months or so. So I want to share what we're seeing companies actually doing about this impact as well. So hang on with me and let's explore what is going on. Before we start, I'd like to remind everyone, subscribe to our YouTube channel for all the great videos that we produce on customer success. In that research that we've done, one of the first things we've seen is that most companies had a knee-jerk reaction to what was going on. I mean, everybody weren't sure what's going to happen, how long is it going to impact. I remember getting surveys around, how long do you think COVID will happen? And we still don't really know. And so it was without a big surprise when we saw more than 50% of companies change their forecast regarding expansion, selling, retention, but mostly, you could see over 50% of the companies changed their forecast by either by 50% or lower. So as much as 50%. I thought that was quite extraordinary. But I think, in these kind of times when there's a much uncertainty, of no doubt, companies are going to tighten their budget. They're going to be a little scared about doing new things, at least in the first few months. And if you look back, most of us has felt it. March, April, May, there wasn't really a lot of new sales deals going on. And then starting June, July, we start a trickle of these upsells and cross-sells. And then obviously now we're starting seeing an uptick in new deals after all this infusion of funds into the market. The second thing then we saw really is the impact on revenues. And like I said, initially, most companies were majorly impacted by the new pipeline. Now, granted, this survey was happening in both April and May. So this is where the major impact has happened. And of course, I think now we're sort of like behind that curve where we're starting to see a trickle in new businesses, even for those technology firms, not just, obviously, if you were in the virtual selling, virtual work type of applications like Zoom and WebEx, of course, you've seen an uptick immediately. You didn't really have that bump in sales, but all of us are starting to see a little bit of a recovery since then. However, you could see that there was not as much of an impact on cross-sell and upsell. And so if you think about it, the impact of the big hit on new sales deals is really a compounded impact. And that's really what the issue is. If you're a CEO, you're really thinking about long-term impact of what is going on. So One, if this was pre-pandemic, this is how the forecast might have looked like. Yeah, we're going to do, gradually better over the years. And what that means in terms of revenues is that if this is new sales deals, then over time, we're expecting overall revenue to compoundedly go up, because for every new deal, that's also a stream of revenue for 21 and a stream of revenue for 22. So what happened is like in February, like March, April, May, when new sales deals were, a little bit more scarce for most of us. If you're in a subscription-based company, then your forecast for 21, 22 was for overall revenues, subscription revenues was diminished as well. And that's where we see an incredible emphasis for the executive team to double down on customer success. Everybody knew this already before, that customer success had a financial impact on subscription-based business. But just like 𝘦𝘹𝘦𝘦𝘯𝘏 says, we interviewed him back in August 2020 to our YouTube channel for CSM Practice. And he said, being able to preserve your customers went from being important to existential. No longer was it just important to do, but everybody, all CEOs were starting to wrap their heads around, how are we going to accommodate for our customers? How are we going to adjust our payment terms? How are we going to adjust for more flexible payments? Because once you lose the existing customers, there's this profound impact on your future forecast and revenues. And so the time is really now to double down on these investments in customer success strategies. And the real question is, if you or your CEOs or your executives are getting on board with that, what should you be doing right now? So I can answer that by really focusing first and foremost on what are we seeing the top customer success initiatives in 2020 in general. So I think it was really interesting. At first, there weren't too many initiatives. Like the first 2-3 months, everybody was scrambling to just save customers. So preventing churn was the first thing that we've seen right off the gate in March, April, May. People were either extending flexible terms, they were giving free usage. So if you were coming up to renewal, you might have gotten additional seats, additional features, all these. It was much more accommodating just to keep you on board. There were many requests for relief in cash flow. I mean, we had CSM Practice, we do some business with other software companies, and we got extended like a 30-day out or freeze in payment until we start reusing those services or software if there was no use for them during COVID. So that was happening first and foremost, but I'm putting it as number 4 because as you go through 2021, coming June, July, and now that we're in November, certainly this is not a high priority anymore because we're already dealt with the initial impact. And so what we're seeing now is, first of all, of course, increasing adoption and scaling operations. I would say back in June, July, August, the chatter on the internet and the requests that we were getting from new deals for CSM Practice was mainly about how do we do digital engagement better. So the first ones to kind of wake up from COVID and start doing something strategically around customer success were actually those who felt the need to improve their digital engagement. So think about it, those were the companies that had self-service, that had a lot of companies that they were dealing with their small customer base. And so they could no longer ignore that small customer base. They actually had to come up with a strategy that would be efficient and they could do it in a strategic manner. What we're seeing now, most and foremost, is that most companies are focused on proving value. This is a major focus for most companies. I put it as number 2 because I still think that most companies are really busy about scaling operations. And there's 2 ways you could do that. One, you can really leverage technology to increase the productivity and efficiency of the team, or you can outsource some of your functions for the smaller customer base or the long tail customer base. And a third one is to really improve your methodology, create a more consistent way to do your processes so that it's more consistent and predictive and there's not a lot of guessing and rework. But proving value is definitely something that we're seeing emerging in the past quarter. There's a lot of chatter on the internet around this topic, and you see a lot of companies double down on proving value. The reason is that if you're focused on being customer-centric and proving value and establishing even an increase in perceived value, you're going to get a few results. First of all, you're going to retain more customers. You're going to expand with your existing customers. And because you were able to prove value and increase awareness to value that you can also bring that they haven't realized yet, you're going to get more advocates, because the more you're focused on what your customers needs and the better centric you are with your customers are actually going to remember those things that you've done for them. And a couple of things that customers or companies have been doing is opening a channel on Slack, for example, to have all their customers chat together about, what are they going to do about COVID, or start opening, end user meetups, just like we did, for example. We launched an executive roundtable every Tuesday, every month, to talk about different things that companies can do post-COVID to improve their customer success strategies. So when you service like that, the community, and you really listen to what the community needs, people are going to remember you and they're going to advocate for you as you go along. So some of the challenges that customers have around proving value, for example, is obviously, if you have a long tail of customers, it's really hard to know how they're leveraging your solution. But let's talk about the high touch too. From a high touch perspective, I think the number one challenge that we're seeing in the ability to prove value is that the team is not trained enough in sales enablement or even value selling methodologies. They're more like, about product adoption. Maybe they moved up from support. They might be like a really good consultant around, implementation, and then they move to CS. So they're not really equipped or comfortable tying or mapping out outcomes to features and functions. They become sort of like the tactical arm to handle escalations, improve adoption, and things of that sort. I think the number one thing that we want to do when we go into proving value is to handle and say, is my team equipped to not just prove value, but also handle value-based conversations? So I'll double click on that as I go deeper into this discussion. So like I said, one of the things that we've seen that companies do to scale the operations is obviously offer different things to customers and become customer-centric. But on the flip side, as we sell to potentially technology firms or other companies, we've seen that everybody's struggling with just, scaling their own teams. And so one of the things that our customers are doing is offering additional services to their customers. And this is to really help them to, first of all, mitigate cash flow risks. Everybody got a little nervous before they, right after COVID regarding cash flow. So there was a lot of hiring freeze, while sometimes they did really well in expansion selling or even retention. They needed more workforce. As a lot of people were let go, some were sent to furlough. And so one of the ways that we could help customers is by offering these additional services, remembering that, they might have a really hard time to scale because they have limited budgets and they can't hire as fast as they need. So some of the services we're seeing technology companies or technology vendors start offering as part of the customer success offering is additional consulting services to implement certain features, recurring services like TAMs, premium support, an ability to outsource. So if you know that your clients need to maintain your application with an admin, or even just doing some of these things from a marketing standpoint, if you're selling a marketing software, they're just missing this persona to actually activate and use the software. Sometimes we're seeing outsourcing services definitely get an uptake. So all of these things, including customer success, by the way, we're starting to see an increase in trend of offering them as a paid service. I want to talk about customer success particularly. I'm personally, as a consultant, I'm getting more and more requests around, hey, can you take a look at around the opportunity to monetize customer success? And I believe the reasoning is, first of all, everybody's sort of like tight on cash. Everybody wants to do the best they can do. And if they can't sell more new business and they were to catch up on the trends, they need to start additional offering, as well as customer success is one of them. The other thing is that it allows you to actually charge for services that you know, in normal words, you would anyways. We all charge for implementations. We all charge for premium support. The question is, why are we charging for customer success? And so some of you might argue, well, it's a coverage risk thing, right? Like if you charge for it, some may not opt into it. And so how are you going to mitigate churn risk, etc.? So for that, I would say, well, you wouldn't get a customer without implementation services in some degree, especially if it's an enterprise solution, and you would mandate the customer to pay for these implementation services. With that logic, you can also mandate a customer to pay for customer success if you deem them to be, you know, your top, I don't know, X strategic customers. Could be your top 25, your top 50, or your top 500. You can mandate that they opt into some sort of a customer success package. And obviously you can offer multiple ones, but I just wanted to double click on that because I think a lot of us don't really consider customer success to be a legitimately something that customers might pay for. And I think there's an art to it, the way you would structure it so that they would. I'm not taking this lightly, but I would say that this is where we're seeing the market going. More and more companies are going to charge for customer success in the next year or two. All right, what if you wanted to double down on your customer success strategy, whether you don't have it at all or you have it, but it's not really where you want it to be? So I wanted to introduce you to this concept of, you know, how do you think visually around structuring your customer success? We talked about it, right? This is the year when everybody should be doubling down on their customer success initiatives, their customer success strategy. So the first thing that I would recommend doing is thinking about the fundamentals. Do you have them down? I can't tell you how many times I go into a company and I do an assessment and I find that the fundamentals are simply not in place. So what do I mean by that? If you think about it, the fundamentals would include, first and foremost, the answer to the question is, what is customer success charter is? What are we about? I sometimes go into specifically larger organization where we interview different team members and we'll interview sales and we ask them, what is the goal of customer success? What do they do? They don't know. So I would just say, you know, solve for that. Not only just define what is your customer success is about, but also educate everybody else. And when you're doing that, make sure they understand, how do they play with you? How should they be playing with you? How can you contribute value to them? That really brings about, what are your key performance indicators? What are the metrics for your team? And when you define those, it should be metrics that relates to value you bring to your customers, but also value that you bring internally. And then finally, really look at your customer success organization. Build it not just for now, but also for next year. What are the kind of roles that you would need in order to scale this organization? What is the proper ratio that requires a customer success operations manager? We're usually seeing that as 1 to 15. So when you have over 15 people, is that the right time to bring a CS ops manager? And then if so, what would they do? Are you going to handle digital engagements? Do you need them? What kind of people do you need? All of it. And then where should you be reporting into? Is renewal going to be something that your team will handle, or are you giving it up to scale? And how do you make that decision correctly? I also want to touch on, so once you have the fundamentals, you want to touch on adoption, expansion, and retention. Some might ask me, is there a specific path that you should take? Like, should you do first adoption, then expansion, then retention? Well, you kind of want to assess where you are, what's your strength, and where's your best opportunity to improve quickly, and then tackle that. I'm just going to go through the different wants to just expand on what you may not know that you already know. But let's start with adoption. So for adoption, to really create good product adoption, you want to think about your onboarding process, obviously. Do you have the proper handoff from sales? Is it your team that's going to do it, or are you going to have a specialized team? Are you going to have a special health score during the adoption, the onboarding phase, to make sure that you can assess whether a customer is going to renew year one? We know for a fact that customers that don't have a successful onboarding in year one, 30% of them are not going to renew in year one. That says most of us don't have a customer success health score for onboarding, and I think that that's a big mistake. The other mistake that I see during onboarding is that there's no activity to create a success plan during the onboarding phase. There's no real definition of what is the first value the customer is going to get at the end of onboarding. And we don't want to say, well, a good onboarding experience, or they're going to have their system up and running. That's not a business value to your customer. Then, of course, you want to start thinking, can I get consumption data or usage data? If you're a SaaS business, you probably have a more chance of getting that than if you're on-premise or simply, have some sort of other business like services. Services, you might get some consumption data around the services that you sell. Either way, you want to create adoption or usage playbooks for red situation, yellow situation, and green situations. So even if you have good usage data, and good usage trends, you want to have some playbooks in place on what do you do when you have new end users joining the application. So consistently, you mitigate risk that way. All right, so let's talk about expansion. There's this new thing that's called value management. It's not really new, but it's kind of like the methodology is incorporating multiple pieces that we keep talking about as separate pieces. So value management is really about the value cycle. You start with maybe a business review where you talk about how the customer is benchmarked against other customers, outcomes that they might have, and then align with the customer around what are the priorities for this year. And then you come up with a success plan to tie back what was said in the meeting regarding business priorities back into how can we leverage our product or solutions to get them there. And then at the end of the cycle, you want to collect what we call a moment of value, which is the customer expressing what kind of value they've gotten out of these efforts. And then you showcase them back in the next business review. CSQLs are just customer success qualified leads. You want to have listening posts throughout the organization. If you had a chance to listen to Gina Hayes' presentation, I highly, highly recommend watching it. She talks a lot about like a complete program they built around this concept. They called it the Trusted Advisor program, where you had actually listening posts both in support, customer success. They had a team that handles the leads, technology that captured the leads, all of that. So this could be a complete enchilada, as they call it, including some blitz campaigns, which is a proactive way to promote expansions with clients on a persistent manner. I have a video on my on my YouTube channel about blitz campaigns if you wanted to watch that. And then, of course, retention. Look, retention was a big thing back in April, May. Maybe it's not the most critical thing for you right now, but I wanted to double click on something. A lot of us are being asked to do a renewal forecast, and it's really hard for us to project the renewals in an accurate manner. There's methodologies to create the renewal in a more consistent way to allow you to do two things. One, create a forecast that's 1 or 2% accurate, which is amazing. And B, enable some of the customers to renew early. Again, there's another video on my channel just about this methodology. I highly recommend watching it. And then, of course, you want to have churn playbooks, what to do when customers actually call to cancel, what to do when you think that they're about to cancel so that you could preemptively align on that. One of those things is an executive alignment program. And of course, the customer health score. We're soon going to release a big research around the health score. Is it effective or not? And if it is, when is it effective? What kind of results you can expect, if any? I think there's a lot of assumptions out there about health score that may or may not be true. That's it. So like I said, if you want to read more and listen more about how to develop a customer success program, I highly recommend it. We have a ton of resources on the YouTube channel, but this specific walkthrough in more detail is available on the channel as well. I'm going to open it up to questions.
Hey, Irit, thank you so much for that, and thank you for staying on point and staying on time. There's a few questions. So let me just go through an order of number of likes and so on. So do we need to rethink how we hire CSMs? Seek CSMs with backgrounds in account management rather than project management or support? Based upon what you've outlined, the core thesis is that should we now rethink, like how we hire the background of a CSM? Do we take CSMs from project management background, support background, or should we focus more, depending on our strategy, on bringing people in who have got account management backgrounds, who can maybe navigate through complexities of large accounts and work the politics and not be afraid of procurement people, maybe, or something like that?
Yeah, interesting question. I think, a few years back, I was pretty passionate about bring people that understand not just the technology, but also the business outcomes and can handle a conversation regarding business outcomes. So the question is, where are they? Where are those people? Are those really account managers? Maybe. Some of them are. Some account managers are too focused on making the quota, and they might not be the greatest fit for customer success. I find that actually people who can navigate between technology and business outcomes are probably have the best skills. So could be solution consultants. By the way, a lot of people go from CSM to solution consulting because they want to make that pre-sales quota commissions. But that's kind of like the best in class and best of breed. Now you might find them in support, a handful of them in support, a handful of them in professional services. You really have to cherry pick to see, do they have that aptitude? Okay,
last question. Why do some companies struggle to prove value? Is it lack of data?
Yeah, I addressed that. It's not necessarily lack of data. I think it's specifically the fact that people don't know how to talk about value, and you don't have a scripted playbook and templates to do so. We don't equip them with that or train them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And again, we were thrilled and honored to have you here. Thank you very much, Irit.